So imagine you're stranded on the shoulder of Interstate 5. It's pouring rain, your dashboard battery gauge just hit absolute zero, and you do what, anyone driving a car for the last 100 years would do. You call a tow truck.
Right, which seems like the logical move.
Exactly. But according to the service bulletins we're analyzing today, making that traditional call might actually instantly cause thousands of dollars in catastrophic damage to your vehicle.
Yeah, it's wild. The legacy systems we built to rescue cars, they're just fundamentally incompatible with the physics of the cars we're driving today. I mean, we're looking at this intersection where old infrastructure literally destroys new technology.
It's crazy. Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at a pretty fascinating stack of operational guides, promotional texts, and service bulletins from a Pacific Northwest company called PortlandMobileEVCharging.com.
It's quite a stack, yeah.
Yeah. And our mission today is to explore the hidden vulnerabilities of driving an EV in the Portland and Vancouver area and, examine this bizarre rapid response micro industry that's evolved basically just to keep these vehicles from being destroyed by the very systems meant to save them.
Right, and what's really striking is that the promotional materials we reviewed, they read less like standard advertisements and much more like, well, survival guides for early adopters.
Oh, totally.
They really expose the friction points of this massive societal transition. Like, it highlights what happens when you remove a century-old network of gas stations and replace it with a system that is, frankly, still very much in its infancy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand why a mobile rescue service is even necessary in a major metropolitan area, we really have to look at the daily navigational reality these drivers face.
The whole no-charger reality they mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. The sources constantly refer to this. You look at the navigation map on your dashboard, right? And it's illuminated with all these available charging pins. The digital interface is basically promising abundance.
Promising, yes, but delivering.
Right, because actually arriving at that physical location reveals a completely different story.
What's fascinating here is just how severe the gap between digital availability and physical reality actually is. I mean, navigation systems and those third-party maps, they rely on APIs.
Software handshakes, right?
Exactly. Software handshakes that often only verify if a charging station has network connectivity. So the server asks the station, hey, are you online? The station says yes, and boom, your map displays a green pin.
But that software handshake doesn't account for the physical condition of the hardware. It's kind of like phantom inventory in e-commerce.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Like you look online, the website says the shoes you want are in stock, so you drive all the way to the store. But the database doesn't know the physical box in the warehouse was, crushed by a forklift yesterday.
Right, the system is blind to the physical world.
Yeah. The charging station might be communicating with the server just fine, but the actual charging cable has been sheared off, or the locking mechanism is jammed, or, maybe the payment card reader is just dead. The sources specifically point out Vancouver as a huge hotspot for these broken plugs.
Which means the digital map isn't just unhelpful, it's actively misleading. It literally encourages drivers to bypass a partially functioning station to reach this so-called perfect station that turns out to be entirely inoperable.
And beyond the hardware failures, there's that human element of infrastructure friction the texts mention, right? Icing?
Yeah, icing, internal combustion engine vehicles blocking the spots. The hardware and software might be perfectly aligned, but a large gas-powered truck is just parked across the only two functioning charging spots.
Just using it as convenient parking.
Exactly, rather than actual fueling infrastructure.
Which completely invalidates that digital promise. I mean, you navigate through heavy Portland traffic, burning your last 3% of battery based on the assumption that a plug is waiting for you, only to be blocked by an obstacle the software could never predict.
It turns every low battery scenario into a massive gamble.
You aren't just driving. I'd call it playing the lottery with your battery every time you leave the house without a full charge.
And the mental load of that unpredictability, it creates a very distinct modern anxiety. I mean, a fuel gauge on a gas car represents a known quantity, right? With universally available, highly visible replenishment points.
Gas stations are everywhere.
Right. But a battery percentage on an EV currently represents a probability. It's a guess about whether the surrounding infrastructure will actually uphold its end of the bargain.
And that probability game becomes incredibly dangerous when time, environment, and location are factored in. The sources paint these highly specific, really high-stress scenarios.
Like the 2 a.m. scenario.
Yeah, exactly. It's one thing to pull into a grocery store on a sunny Tuesday afternoon and find a broken plug. It is an entirely different beast when it's 2 a.m. in Portland. The rain is coming down in sheets, your battery dies, and the only nearby stations are described in the text as being located in these dark, isolated industrial areas.
Well, the severity of an infrastructure failure, it scales exponentially with the vulnerability of the environment.
Oh, absolutely.
Waiting 45 minutes for a functional plug in a well-lit commercial plaza, that's an inconvenience.
It
Waiting 45 minutes in an unlit, isolated lot in the middle of the night that elevates the failure to a genuine physical threat.
The sources highlight a similar anxiety surrounding PDX, too. Portland International Airport. You fly back from a long business trip, you're exhausted, and you step into the parking garage only to discover it's a complete charging desert.
Or you miscalculate your range, and the battery dies entirely while you're merging onto the I-5 corridor.
Right. And a sudden loss of propulsion on a major, fast-moving artery like I-5 is just terrifying. The vehicle literally becomes a fixed object in a kinetic environment.
It's incredibly dangerous.
But, okay, I look at these scenarios, the airport, the highway, the 2 a.m. dead battery, and I kind of want to push back on the core premise for a second. Doesn't this just come down to user responsibility?
How do you mean?
Like, if you know you're driving to the airport for a 4-day trip or embarking on a long stretch of highway, why not just ensure the battery is charged before you leave? I mean, a cynic could argue these rescue services are just subsidizing terrible planning.
I get that, but that perspective assumes travel is a static, perfectly predictable equation, and the kinetic reality of human movement is just chaotic.
Fair point.
I mean, a
Right.
driver might plan perfectly for a 6 p.m. return flight, charge accordingly, and park. But a cascading weather delay pushes their return to 2 a.m., and during those extra 8 hours, a severe cold snap hits Portland.
Oh, right. And the vehicle's thermal management system has to wake up.
Exactly. The car is actively drawing power from the battery pack just to keep the internal chemistry of the cells from freezing and degrading while it's sitting there in the airport lot.
Wow, so a driver returns to a vehicle that consumed its own energy reserves just to survive the weather.
Yeah. Or consider the highway scenario.
Yeah.
A perfectly planned route on I-5 gets interrupted by a major collision ahead, forcing a grueling 2-hour detour through stop-and-go gridlock that just drains those remaining kilowatt hours.
So it's not always the driver's fault.
Not at all. When the underlying infrastructure is this brittle, minor, unavoidable deviations quickly escalate into critical failures, you can't really plan better when the backup options you meticulously charted are broken, occupied, or physically unsafe to access.
And that systemic brittleness leads us directly into, honestly, the most alarming revelation in this entire stack of documents. When all the planning fails, when the digital map lies, and you're finally stranded on the side of the road, the instinctive reaction is to call for a traditional tow truck.
Yes, the instinct is strong.
But the service bulletins from PortlandMobileEVCharging.com explicitly scream that doing so is the absolute worst possible decision.
It really is. The warnings regarding standard towing procedures are the most critical operational directives in these materials. They outline 2 distinct hazards: a predatory economic trap and a catastrophic mechanical threat.
Let's look at the economic trap first. The text described this price towing scam prevalent in the Portland and Vancouver markets. Because EVs require specialized handling, predatory towing operators basically use this as leverage to charge exorbitant, wildly inflated emergency fees.
And then they load the car and drag it to a dealership, which introduces a whole secondary penalty: massive downtime.
Right. The vehicle is now trapped in the dealership's service queue.
Which could mean days of waiting just to address a depleted battery. You're paying the inflated tow fee, the dealership processing fee, and absorbing the cost of losing your transportation.
But the financial extortion kind of pales in comparison to the mechanical danger. Here's where it gets really interesting. The sources explicitly state that improper standard towing can literally fry the drivetrain of major EV brands like Tesla and Rivian.
Fry it completely, yes.
I really want to dig into the physics of this. Why does a tow truck, a tool designed entirely to move broken cars, suddenly become a destructive weapon when applied to an EV?
Well, this raises an important question about how we view car mechanics. It requires completely abandoning how we think about a traditional car's transmission. In a legacy gas-powered vehicle, shifting the gear selector into neutral physically and mechanically disconnects the engine from the wheels.
Oh, okay, right.
So whether by a clutch or a fluid coupling, the wheels can spin freely while the engine remains completely inert. You can drag a gas car for miles, and the internal components of the engine never even move.
But EVs lack that physical disconnect. The electric motors are permanently geared to the wheels, right? There is no traditional neutral that separates the two.
Exactly. When the wheels of an EV turn, the internal components of the electric motor turn. An electric motor spinning without being actively powered by the battery fundamentally changes its function.
Wait, how so?
It ceases to be a motor and instantly becomes a generator. It takes the kinetic energy of the turning wheels and converts it back into electrical current.
Oh, so this is the underlying principle of regenerative braking. Like when you take your foot off the accelerator, the motors use the momentum of the car to generate electricity, which slows the car down and feeds power back into the battery pack.
Under normal operating conditions, yes. The vehicle's onboard computers highly regulate that process. They manage the voltage, route the current safely into the battery cells, and monitor the thermal load.
But if the battery is dead?
Right. When an EV has a dead battery and the computer systems are entirely shut down, there's absolutely no software managing that flow of electricity.
So a tow truck operator hooks up the EV, leaves the rear wheels on the pavement, and starts dragging the vehicle down the highway at 50 miles per hour. Those permanently geared wheels spin the dead motors, aggressively generating massive amounts of electrical current.
Current that has absolutely nowhere safe to go. It can't enter the battery pack because the safety contactors are open and the computers are offline.
Wow.
That massive spike of unmanaged electrical energy just hits the inverter and the surrounding high-voltage circuitry. It generates immense heat, literally melting internal components, fusing wiring, and resulting in catastrophic failure.
That is insane. So by simply pulling the car onto a flatbed incorrectly or dragging it with two wheels on the ground, the legacy rescue system force feeds electricity into a dead system until it burns out.
Yes, it's a brutal systemic incompatibility. The traditional cure is vastly more destructive than the disease.
You run out of power, you call for help, and the help causes thousands of dollars in permanent damage.
This physical vulnerability really underscores the massive risk of relying on legacy infrastructure to support next-generation technology. It isn't just inefficient, it is actively hostile to the new hardware.
Now, the promotional materials make a sharp pivot to clarify that this threat isn't just a headache for weekend commuters. For a massive segment of the Portland workforce, this brittle infrastructure and dangerous towing reality threatens their actual livelihood.
Right, commercial drivers.
Yeah, the documents specifically call out commercial electric delivery fleets and rideshare operators driving for Uber and Lyft.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the gig economy and last-mile delivery services operate on razor-thin margins. Their entire economic model is predicated on high utilization rates. The vehicle must be in motion, serving a client or delivering a package to generate revenue.
The promos state it clearly. If you're not driving, you're losing money. But examining the economics of gig work reveals the damage is much deeper than just paused revenue. It is the active destruction of peak earning windows. Imagine an Uber driver operating in downtown Portland on a Friday night during peak surge pricing. Their battery drops to 10%. They can't accept another ride.
They're forced to abandon a high-demand zone to hunt for a functional supercharger. And if they encounter the phantom availability we discussed earlier, arriving at a station to find broken software handshakes or a gas-powered truck blocking the spot, they're now burning their final reserves of energy just searching for a lifeline.
And even if they find a working plug, if it's a slower level 2 public charger, they are tethered to that spot for hours. They miss the entire surge pricing window.
Right.
The infrastructure bottleneck transforms from an inconvenience into a direct tax on their income. A dead battery for a rideshare driver doesn't just ruin their night, it severely damages their weekly profit margin.
When commercial fleets are forced to rely on a public grid that cannot guarantee uptime, the macroeconomic friction is just immense. I mean, you can't transition a city's commercial transport to electric power if the fueling mechanism requires drivers to gamble their earning hours on unreliable APIs and broken hardware.
So, this cascading series of failures, the misleading maps, the dangerous environments, the physically destructive towing practices, and the economic drain on gig workers. It all creates the specific vacuum that PortlandMobileEVCharging.com was built to fill.
A huge vacuum, yeah.
Their service model represents a fundamental paradigm shift in emergency response.
They recognize that moving a mathematically compromised vehicle to a stationary power source introduces too many variables and way too much risk. The solution is to decouple the energy source from a fixed geographic location entirely.
So what does this all mean? It functions kind of like in-flight refueling for aircraft or, like food delivery for your battery. You're safely parked on the shoulder of I-5 or sitting in your spot at the PDX parking garage. The mobile rescue unit arrives directly at your coordinates.
And crucially, the wheels of the EV never move.
Right. The vehicle remains entirely stationary. There is zero risk of the motors generating rogue current. The inverter is safe, the drivetrain is protected, and the manufacturer's warranty remains intact.
Exactly. The service bypasses the predatory towing fees and completely eliminates the dealership wait times.
They just deploy a specialized mobile unit, transfer enough high-voltage current in a matter of minutes to give the vehicle functional range, and the driver simply navigates to a known working station or their home charger.
By intercepting the vehicle, they neutralize every systemic threat. They remove the physical danger of waiting in an unlit industrial park. They negate the mechanical threat of the tow truck. And for the commercial driver, they transform what would have been a catastrophic loss of a shift into a minor calculated pit stop.
We are witnessing the inversion of a 100-year-old operational model. Since the invention of the automobile, the unbending rule was that the machine must travel to the centralized infrastructure.
You must take the car to the gas station.
Yeah, but this micro-industry flips that entirely on its head. The macrogrid is failing, so they deploy a localized microgrid. The gas station now travels to the car.
It's an innovation born purely out of necessity. 10 years ago, this specific business model did not need to exist. Today, it acts as the vital shock absorber between cutting-edge automotive technology and an environment that is struggling to accommodate it.
So, to synthesize the intelligence from this stack of sources, the reality of EV adoption in the Pacific Northwest involves navigating severe hidden gaps. Digital charging maps frequently present phantom availability, masking broken hardware and ICE-ing conflicts.
And relying on traditional tow trucks when stranded introduces those catastrophic mechanical risks, as pulling an EV forces the unpowered motors to generate heat that destroys the drivetrain.
And because the traditional safety nets are either unreliable or actively dangerous, mobile on-demand charging units are stepping in to provide a necessary bypass. They keep the wheels stationary, protect the hardware, and drastically reduce downtime for commercial fleets who lose money every minute they aren't driving.
Which is why the relevance of this shift extends far beyond early adopters.
Totally. Whether you already own an electric vehicle, are analyzing the market for a future purchase, or simply rely on the gig economy for your food delivery and airport rides, the brittleness of this infrastructure dictates the reliability of the services moving around your city.
The friction between old roads and new tech really impacts the safety of the corridor and the economics of the local workforce.
We are definitely in the messy, complicated middle phase of a massive infrastructural pivot.
We really are.
And that leads to a fascinating final thought for you to consider. We view these mobile charging fleets today as emergency band-aids. They're dispatched only when the system fails. But looking at the efficiency of bringing power directly to a stationary vehicle, could this emergency measure actually be a prototype for the everyday norm?
Like erasing the need for centralized charging entirely.
Exactly. Consider the massive real estate and capital required to build sprawling charging plazas. What if, in the near future, you never manually plug your vehicle in again? Imagine autonomous battery drones that navigate city grids, locating your parked EV while you sleep in your apartment or sit in your office.
Wow.
They initiate a handshake, transfer the necessary power, and detach seamlessly. Will the very concept of driving to a designated location just to acquire energy soon be viewed as an archaic burden of the past? We might not need to fix the charging map. We might just need to erase it.